I stood near the back of the room, my hands folded over my black handbag, watching mourners file past the casket where Gloria Hartley lay in eternal repose. I hadn't known the woman well, only through my daughter-in-law, Rebecca, who had married my son Jeffrey 8 years ago. Gloria had always been polite but distant during our few encounters, and I'd attributed it to the natural reserve some people carry. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. Rebecca stood at the front, composed but pale, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun. Jeffrey held her elbow protectively, his face etched with concern for his grieving wife. They made a handsome couple, my son with his father's strong jaw, and Rebecca with her delicate features. I was proud of them both, proud of the life they'd built together. What I wasn't prepared for was the woman who walked through the door at 2:15. She could have been Rebecca's reflection. Same height, same build, same blonde hair, though worn loose around her shoulders. She wore a charcoal dress instead of black, and her makeup was heavier, more dramatic. But the resemblance was unmistakable, unsettling even. Several heads turned as she entered, whispers rippling through the gathered mourners like wind through wheat. I felt my pulse quicken. Rebecca had always told us she was an only child. I remembered distinctly. It was one of the first things she'd shared when Jeffrey brought her home to our farm in rural Pennsylvania. No siblings, she'd said with a wistful smile. Just me and Mom. Dad passed when I was 12. I watched as the woman approached the casket, her movements graceful and deliberate. She stood there for a long moment, head bowed, then turned and made her way directly to Rebecca. The two women embraced, and I saw Rebecca stiffen slightly before relaxing into the hug. They spoke in low tones, their heads close together, and I felt something twist in my stomach, an instinct honed over 70 years of reading people and situations. Something wasn't right. Jeffrey noticed me watching and excused himself from a conversation with Gloria's neighbor. He crossed the room, his face puzzled but not alarmed. "Mom, you okay? You look pale. Who is that woman?" I asked quietly, nodding toward Rebecca and her companion. Jeffrey glanced over. "Oh, that's Vanessa, Rebecca's sister." The words hit me like cold water. "Sister? Jeffrey, Rebecca told us she was an only child." He frowned, confusion creasing his brow. "No, she has a twin. Vanessa lives in Seattle. They're not close. There was some family drama years ago. Rebecca doesn't like to talk about it. A twin." How had this never come up in 8 years? Not at the wedding, not at family dinners, not during holidays at our farmhouse when Rebecca would share stories about her childhood. The omission felt deliberate, calculated, and the way Jeffrey said it, so matter-of-fact, as if this was common knowledge, made me realize my daughter-in-law had told him one story and us another. Why? I needed air. The funeral home suddenly felt claustrophobic, the floral arrangements cloying. I excused myself and made my way down the hallway toward the restrooms, my sensible heels clicking against the tile floor. The ladies' room was at the end of a quiet corridor, away from the main viewing area. I was halfway there when I heard voices. They were coming from a small alcove just before the restrooms, a recessed area with a bench and a painting of a pastoral scene. I recognized Rebecca's voice immediately, though I'd never heard it sound quite so cold. "Now that Mom is gone, she can't tell anyone what we did. We're finally safe." I froze, my hand reaching for the wall to steady myself. The voice that responded was identical in timbre and tone. "Vanessa, are you sure? What about the records? Mom kept everything locked up in her safety deposit box, but after she got sick, she brought the documents here. Once I destroy what's left, there's nothing linking us to Chicago." Chicago? Rebecca had said she grew up in Portland. Another lie. My heart hammered against my ribs. I pressed myself against the wall, hardly daring to breathe. Every instinct screamed at me to walk away, to pretend I'd heard nothing, to preserve the careful peace of my family. But 70 years on this earth had taught me that buried secrets have a way of erupting at the worst possible moments. "What about Jeffrey?" Vanessa asked. "He doesn't suspect anything?" Rebecca's laugh was brittle. "Jeffrey sees what he wants to see. He thinks his mother is just a sweet old farm woman, and he thinks I'm the devoted wife. Neither of them has a clue. The contempt in her voice when she spoke about me stung more than I wanted to admit. I'd welcomed this woman into our family, into our home. I'd taught her how to make my mother's apple pie recipe, helped her plant her first vegetable garden, listened to her talk about her dreams and fears. Or had I? Had any of it been real? What about the money? Vanessa pressed. Once probate clears, we split it 50-50, just like we agreed. But we have to be patient, and you have to stay away from Pennsylvania. If Jeffrey's mother starts asking questions, she won't, Vanessa cut in. Old women believe what they're told. Besides, what could she possibly do? Their footsteps suddenly moved toward my direction. Panic surged through me. I couldn't let them find me here. Couldn't let them know I'd overheard. I hurried into the ladies' room, my hands shaking as I locked myself in a stall. The door to the restroom opened moments later. You need to be more careful, Rebecca hissed. Someone could have heard us. Relax. Everyone's in the viewing room. I heard the sound of running water, the snap of a compact opening. They were fixing their makeup, composing themselves. I stayed absolutely still, barely breathing, my mind racing through everything I'd just learned. What had they done in Chicago? What records was Rebecca planning to destroy? And what money were they talking about? Surely just Gloria's estate. But the way they spoke suggested something darker, more calculated. The twins left after a few minutes, their voices fading down the hallway. I waited a full 5 minutes before emerging from the stall. My reflection in the mirror showed a pale, frightened woman, but beneath the fear I could see something else taking root. Determination. I'd spent my whole life on our family farm, raising Jeffrey and his sister Clara, managing the accounts, navigating the challenges of rural life with my late husband Thomas. I'd learned to read weather patterns and market trends, to spot a sick calf before symptoms became critical, to sense when something was off with the land, or the animals, or the people around me. And something was very, very off with Rebecca and Vanessa. I returned to the viewing room, composing my features into an expression of quiet sympathy. Rebecca saw me and smiled warmly, crossing the room to take my hands in hers. Thank you so much for coming, Melissa. It means the world to have family here. Family. The word felt hollow now, performative. I squeezed her hands gently, maintaining the charade. Of course, dear. I'm so sorry for your loss. I paused, as if something had just occurred to me. I met your sister earlier. What a lovely woman. I had no idea you had a twin. Rebecca's smile didn't waver, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. Calculation, perhaps. Or wariness. Yes, Vanessa and I had a falling out years ago. We've only recently reconnected. It's still a bit painful to talk about. The lie came so smoothly, so naturally. How many others had she told? How many times had she looked me in the eye and deceived me without hesitation? I understand, I said softly. Family can be complicated. Speaking of which, Rebecca lowered her voice, glancing toward where Jeffrey stood talking to the funeral director. I wanted to mention something. Mom's affairs are going to take some time to settle. There's the house to deal with, her belongings. I might need to make a few trips to Portland over the next few months. Portland again, not Chicago. I nodded sympathetically. Whatever you need, dear. Jeffrey and I will support you through this. She squeezed my hands gratefully, and I saw genuine relief in her expression. She thought she'd smoothed over any suspicion, reassured the old farm woman who wouldn't ask difficult questions. But Melissa Green had been underestimated before, and those who made that mistake usually regretted it. That night, back at the farm, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of chamomile tea and my laptop. Jeffrey and Rebecca had driven back to their house in Harrisburg, leaving me alone with the cats and my thoughts. The old farmhouse creaked around me, familiar and comforting. Thomas had built much of it with his own hands, and even though he'd been gone 5 years, I still felt his presence in every corner. I opened a search engine and typed, Rebecca Hartley, Chicago. Nothing immediately relevant appeared. I tried variations. Rebecca and Vanessa Hartley, Hartley Twins Chicago, Gloria Hartley Chicago. The results were sparse, mostly social media profiles that didn't match or articles unrelated to my search. I sat back, frustrated. Whatever secret the twins were protecting, they'd been careful to keep it off the internet. But secrets always left traces. The question was where to look and how to look without alerting them to my suspicions. I thought about the safety deposit box Rebecca had mentioned, the documents she wanted to destroy. Those would be in Portland. Or would they? If she'd lied about so much else, maybe that was misdirection too. My phone buzzed with a text from Jeffrey. Home safe. Rebecca's exhausted. Thanks for being there today, Mom. Love you. I texted back a heart emoji, my chest tight with conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to call him right now, to tell him what I'd overheard and warn him that his wife might not be who he thought she was. But another part, the part that had learned patience through decades of farming, where you can't rush the seasons or force a crop to grow, knew I needed more information first. Accusations without proof would only drive a wedge between us. Rebecca would deny everything, paint me as a confused old woman, and Jeffrey would be forced to choose between his mother and his wife. I couldn't risk losing my son over suspicions and overheard fragments of conversation. No, I needed evidence. I needed to understand what the twins had done before I could protect Jeffrey from it. I pulled out my address book, an actual paper book, leather-bound and worn, and flipped through the pages until I found what I was looking for. Stephen Lewis, a name from 30 years ago when he'd helped us with a property dispute involving our northern acreage. He'd been a young private investigator then, sharp and thorough. The case had been resolved in our favor thanks to his work. I had no idea if he was still in business or even still alive, but it was a place to start. I glanced at the clock. 10:30. Too late to call. Tomorrow, I decided. Tomorrow I would make the call and take the first step down a path I suspected would change everything. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the window frames. Storm coming, probably. I could smell it in the air, that particular electric quality that precedes a downpour. I'd always been good at reading signs, at sensing when conditions were about to shift. And every instinct I had was screaming that a storm was coming, one that had nothing to do with weather, and everything to do with the secrets buried in my daughter-in-law's past. I finished my tea and locked up the house, checking doors and windows with my usual thoroughness. Upstairs in my bedroom, I changed into my nightgown and sat at the window seat that overlooked the east pasture. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light across the fields Thomas and I had worked for 43 years. This land represented everything I believed in. Honesty, hard work, roots that went deep. Whatever Rebecca and Vanessa had done, whatever they were hiding, it threatened not just my son's happiness, but the values this family had been built on. I would uncover their secret. I would protect Jeffrey. And I would do it with the same careful patience I'd learned from a lifetime of coaxing life from stubborn soil. The storm broke just after midnight, rain hammering against the roof in sheets. I lay awake listening to it, thinking about twin sisters and Chicago and words spoken in a funeral home alcove. Now that Mom is gone, she can't tell anyone what we did. We're finally safe. Whatever they'd done, they'd been living with the fear of exposure for years. Gloria had been their insurance policy, the one person who could reveal their secret. And now she was gone. And they thought they were finally free. But they'd miscalculated. They'd underestimated the old farm woman who watched and listened and remembered everything. As the thunder rolled across the valley, I made myself a promise. I would find out what Rebecca and Vanessa had done. And when I did, I would make sure they faced the consequences. Not through violence or revenge, but through the same quiet persistence that had carried me through 70 years of life's challenges. The truth always surfaces eventually. You just have to know where to dig. Stephen Lewis's office was nothing like I remembered. 30 years ago, he'd operated out of a cramped space above a hardware store in downtown Harrisburg. Now, according to the address his secretary had given me over the phone, Lewis Investigations occupied a respectable suite in a modern building near the Capitol complex. I'd called him first thing Monday morning, 3 days after the funeral. His voice had aged, deeper, rougher, but he'd remembered me immediately. Mrs. Green, the farm dispute case. You made the best apple pie I've ever tasted. That memory had sealed my confidence in him. A man who remembered small kindnesses after 3 decades was someone I could trust. Now I sat across from him in his tidy office, my hands folded over my purse, feeling suddenly uncertain about what I was doing. Stephen had aged well, his dark hair now silver but still thick, his brown eyes sharp and assessing behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Tell me everything," he said simply, pulling out a yellow legal pad. I did. The funeral, the twin sister, the overheard conversation, Rebecca's lies about being an only child and growing up in Portland versus Chicago. When I finished, Stephen was quiet for a long moment, his pen tapping against the pad. "You understand this could get complicated," he said finally. "If your daughter-in-law discovers you're investigating her—" "She won't," I interrupted, more firmly than I felt. "I've been managing a farm and a family for 50 years without broadcasting my every move." He smiled slightly. "Fair enough. I'll need some basic information to start. Rebecca's full name, date of birth if you know it, any other details you can provide about her background." I pulled out a small notebook from my purse. I'd prepared for this, writing down everything I knew about Rebecca. Her maiden name, Hartley. Approximate age, 34. Where she and Jeffrey had met. A coffee shop in Harrisburg where she'd been working. Her mother's full name, Gloria Ann Hartley. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Stephen took notes, asking occasional questions. "And the twin's name is Vanessa? Same last name?" "I assume so." She didn't introduce herself. "I only know her name from Jeffrey." "I'll start with public records, see what I can find about the sisters and their mother. Chicago will be the focus, since that's where they apparently have something to hide." He paused, studying me with those keen eyes. "Mrs. Green, I have to ask, have you considered that whatever I find might be something you don't want to know?" I met his gaze steadily. "My son married this woman. She shares his bed, his home, his future. If there's something in her past that could hurt him, I need to know. Whatever the truth is, I can handle it." "All right then. I'll be in touch within a week." I wrote him a check for the retainer, my hand steady despite the nervous flutter in my stomach. As I left his office, I felt both relieved and terrified. I'd set something in motion that couldn't be undone. The drive back to the farm took 40 minutes, winding through the rolling Pennsylvania countryside I'd known my whole life. Spring was pushing through the last remnants of winter, buds appearing on the maple trees, early crocuses dotting the roadside. Normally, this time of year filled me with optimism. Today, everything felt shadowed by uncertainty. I was halfway home when my phone rang. Jeffrey's name appeared on the screen. "Hi, honey," I answered, forcing cheerfulness into my voice. "Hey, Mom. Listen, are you free for dinner tonight? Rebecca wants to cook for you." Her way of saying thanks for being at the funeral. My stomach clenched. The last thing I wanted was to sit across from Rebecca and pretend everything was normal, while hiding what I knew. But refusing would raise questions. That's sweet of her. "What time? 6:30? We could pick you up." No, I'll drive myself. I have some errands to run in town anyway." A lie, but a necessary one. I wanted my own transportation, my own means of escape if the evening became too unbearable. "Great. See you then, Mom." I hung up and gripped the steering wheel tighter. 6 hours to prepare myself for an evening of deception. Me pretending ignorance, Rebecca pretending devotion. The irony wasn't lost on me. Back at the farm, I tried to distract myself with chores. I cleaned the chicken coop, repaired a section of fence that had come loose during last week's storm, reorganized the pantry. Physical work had always been my therapy, a way to quiet an anxious mind. But today, it barely helped. At 5 o'clock, I showered and changed into a comfortable sweater and slacks. I looked at myself in the mirror, a 70-year-old woman with silver hair and worry lines, wearing sensible shoes and modest jewelry. This was who Rebecca saw when she looked at me. Someone harmless, someone easily dismissed. She had no idea what I was capable of. The drive to Jeffrey and Rebecca's house took 20 minutes. They lived in a pleasant subdivision on the outskirts of Harrisburg, the kind of neighborhood where every lawn was perfectly maintained and every house looked almost identical. Their home was a 2-story colonial with blue shutters and a front porch decorated with carefully arranged potted plants. Rebecca answered the door wearing an apron over her dress, her smile warm and welcoming. "Melissa, come in, come in. Dinner's almost ready." The house smelled of roasted chicken and herbs. Jeffrey appeared from the kitchen, kissed my cheek, and took my coat. Everything was so normal, so domestic. If I didn't know better, I would never suspect the woman bustling around the kitchen was hiding something dark. "Can I help with anything?" I offered. "Just sit and relax," Rebecca insisted, guiding me to the dining room. "You've done so much for us over the years. Let me take care of you for once." The table was set beautifully. Good china, cloth napkins, fresh flowers in a centerpiece. Rebecca had gone to considerable effort. I wondered if this was guilt or calculation, a performance designed to reinforce the image of the devoted daughter-in-law. Over dinner, we made small talk. Jeffrey told me about a project at work. He was a civil engineer, currently overseeing the renovation of a historic bridge. Rebecca shared plans for her mother's house, which would need to be cleared out and put on the market. "It's in Portland, right?" I asked innocently, cutting into my chicken. "That's quite a trip." "Yes," Rebecca said smoothly. "I'm planning to fly out next month, spend about a week going through everything. Mom was a bit of a pack rat, unfortunately. 50 years of accumulated belongings. I can't imagine how overwhelming that must be." I sympathized. "Will your sister help?" Something flickered across Rebecca's face, just for an instant, before the pleasant mask returned. "Vanessa has her own life in Seattle. We'll coordinate, but most of the work will fall to me." "That hardly seems fair," I ventured. "Surely as twins you should share the burden equally." Rebecca's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Vanessa and I have different approaches to these things. I prefer to handle it myself and avoid conflict." Jeffrey reached over and squeezed his wife's hand. "Mom, Rebecca's relationship with her sister is complicated. Let's not push." I backed off, as expected. The dutiful mother respecting boundaries. But I'd learned something. Rebecca was uncomfortable discussing Vanessa, and Jeffrey was protective of his wife's sensitivity on the subject. They'd trained him well, I realized. Trained him to deflect questions and defend their privacy. After dinner, while Rebecca served coffee and homemade pie, my phone buzzed with a text. I glanced at it discreetly under the table. "Stephen Lewis. Need to speak with you. Important. Call when alone." My heart rate kicked up. It had only been hours since our meeting. What could he have found so quickly? "Everything okay, Mom?" Jeffrey asked, noticing my distraction. "Oh, just Clara checking in," I lied, referring to my daughter who lived in Vermont. "I'll call her back later." I made it through the rest of the evening on autopilot, praising Rebecca's cooking, admiring their recent renovations to the guest bathroom, discussing plans for Easter which was still weeks away. Every moment felt like walking on a tightrope, maintaining perfect balance while my mind screamed with questions about Stephen's message. Finally, at 9 o'clock, I made my excuses. "These old bones need their rest," I said with a self-deprecating smile. "Thank you both for a lovely evening." Rebecca hugged me at the door. "Drive safe. And Melissa, I really do appreciate you being there for me last week. It meant everything." I hugged her back, feeling her slender frame against mine, and wondered what secrets that body carried. What had those hands done in Chicago? What lies had that sweet mouth told? "Family takes care of family," I said softly, and saw genuine emotion in her eyes. Or was it just another layer of deception? I drove home carefully through the dark country roads, waiting until I was safely inside my farmhouse before calling Stephen back. He answered on the first ring. "Mrs. Green, I'm glad you called. What did you find?" I ran a basic background check on Rebecca Hartley, cross-referencing with Chicago records like you suggested. He paused. "There's no record of anyone named Rebecca or Vanessa Hartley ever living in Chicago." I sank into my kitchen chair. "That's impossible. I heard them. I'm not saying they weren't there. I'm saying they weren't there under those names." His voice was grave. "Mrs. Green, I also checked Portland. Gloria Ann Hartley did live there, but only for the past 12 years. Before that, there's a gap. No employment records, no property records, nothing for nearly 15 years. People don't just vanish for 15 years, I whispered. No, they don't. Not unless they're hiding from something or running from something." He paused again. "There's more. I found a marriage certificate for your son. Rebecca listed her birthplace as Portland, Oregon, and her parents as Gloria and Robert Hartley. Robert died when she was 12. She told us that. I'm sure she did. But there's no death certificate for any Robert Hartley matching the right age range in Oregon. I've checked 3 states so far. Nothing. The room felt suddenly cold. So everything she told us is a lie. It appears that way. The question is why? What are they hiding that requires an entirely fabricated past? I thought about the overheard conversation again. Now that Mom is gone, she can't tell anyone what we did. What crime was serious enough to require new identities? What had 2 young women done that haunted them years later? I need you to keep digging, I said firmly. Find out who they really are. Mrs. Green, if they're using false identities, this goes beyond a simple background check. We could be talking about witness protection, fraud, or something worse. Are you sure you want to continue? My son is married to a woman who doesn't exist. Yes, I'm sure. All right. But be careful. If Rebecca realizes you're investigating, she might. He didn't finish the sentence, but I understood the implication. Someone who had built an entire false life wouldn't let it crumble without a fight. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, the silence of the old house pressing in around me. The antique clock on the wall ticked steadily, the sound that had marked every important moment of my adult life. Thomas's death, the kids' graduations, quiet mornings and peaceful evenings. Now it counted down to something else, a reckoning. I went to Thomas's old study, a room I'd barely touched in 5 years, and pulled out the filing cabinet where we'd kept important documents. Birth certificates, deeds, insurance policies, tax returns going back decades. Everything organized, everything documented, everything real. My hands found what I was looking for. Jeffrey's birth certificate, his social security card, the deed to the small trust fund we'd established when he was born. Evidence of a life lived in the light, with nothing to hide. Rebecca had none of this. No real past, no genuine history. She'd inserted herself into my son's life like a virus into healthy tissue, and now I had to cut her out before she destroyed him. But I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof. I returned to the kitchen and pulled out my laptop again. This time, I searched for something different. Missing Persons Chicago, 2010-2015, and Chicago Unsolved Crimes Twins. The results were overwhelming. Hundreds of cases, thousands of names. But somewhere in that digital haystack was a needle, a story that would explain why 2 women had erased their past and built new lives on lies. I was still searching at midnight when exhaustion finally forced me to bed. As I climbed the stairs, I heard the wind picking up outside, branches scraping against the siding. Tomorrow, I decided. Tomorrow I would visit the local library and search newspaper archives. I would call Stephen again and push him to expand his search. I would smile at Rebecca and play the harmless old woman while secretly pulling apart every thread of her fabricated life. The storm that had started at a funeral home was just beginning, and this time, I was the one who wouldn't be safe. The Harrisburg Public Library opened at 9 on Tuesday mornings. I was waiting at the doors at 8:45, my notebook and reading glasses in hand, feeling like a detective in one of those old mystery novels Thomas used to read. The librarian, a young woman with kind eyes and colorful tattoos, helped me access the newspaper archives. "We have digital records going back to 1995, she explained, settling me at a computer terminal. "What dates are you interested in?" "Chicago Tribune, 2008 to 2015, I said. "I'm looking for stories about twins, missing persons, or unsolved crimes involving sisters." She didn't ask why, bless her, just showed me how to use the search functions and left me to my work. For 2 hours, I scrolled through headlines and articles, my eyes straining at the screen. Hundreds of stories, none of them quite right. Then, at 11:15, I found something that made my blood run cold. Twin sisters sought in suburban investment fraud scheme. The article was from September 2012, buried in the Metro section. I leaned closer, my heart pounding. Chicago police are seeking Rachel and Veronica Brenner, 22-year-old twin sisters, in connection with an investment fraud that bilked elderly victims out of an estimated $800,000. The sisters allegedly posed as financial advisors, targeting retirees in affluent Chicago suburbs. Victims report that the twins worked in tandem, with one sister building trust while the other managed the fraudulent accounts. Warrants have been issued for their arrest on charges of wire fraud, identity theft, and elder abuse. Anyone with information should contact. The article included a photograph, grainy and black and white from the newspaper scan. Two young women, blonde, pretty, almost identical. The caption read, "Rachel and Veronica Brenner, wanted for questioning." My hands trembled as I zoomed in on the faces. They were younger, early 20s instead of mid-30s. But the bone structure was right, the set of the eyes, the shape of the mouths. I couldn't be absolutely certain from a 12-year-old newspaper photo, but every instinct screamed that I was looking at Rebecca and Vanessa. Elder fraud. They'd targeted people my age, people like Thomas and me, stealing their retirement savings and disappearing. And now one of them was married to my son. I printed the article along with several others from follow-up stories. The investigation had apparently gone cold within months. The Brenner sisters had vanished completely, and police speculated they'd fled to Mexico or changed their identities. By 2014, the case was rarely mentioned. The final article I found, from January 2015, reported that most victims had never recovered their money. Several had lost their homes. One elderly man had taken his own life after losing everything to the Brenner twins. I sat back in my chair feeling sick. These weren't just con artists. They were predators who destroyed lives without remorse. And Gloria had known. She must have helped them disappear, helped them create new identities as Rebecca and Vanessa Hartley. Now that Mom is gone, she can't tell anyone what we did. I gathered my printouts with shaking hands and thanked the librarian. In my car, I called Stephen immediately. "I found them," I said without preamble. "Rachel and Veronica Brenner, Chicago, 2012. Elder fraud." There was a sharp intake of breath. "You're certain?" "As certain as I can be from a newspaper photo. You need to verify it, but Stephen, they stole from retirees. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. People lost everything. I'll start cross-referencing immediately. Mrs. Green, if this is accurate, we need to involve the police." "Not yet." The words came out harder than I intended. "I need to understand the full picture first. If we go to the police now, Rebecca will know I'm behind it. She could run, and Jeffrey—" My voice broke slightly. "Jeffrey will be devastated. I need to handle this carefully." "Melissa." It was the first time he'd used my first name. "If your daughter-in-law is a wanted fugitive, you could be in danger. These aren't people who play games. I've been careful. She has no idea I suspect anything." "Are you sure about that?" The question chilled me. Was I sure? Had I been as convincing as I thought during dinner? Had my questions about Vanessa been too pointed? "Just verify the identification," I said. "Please." He agreed, reluctantly, and we hung up. I sat in the library parking lot, staring at the grainy photo of the Brenner twins. 22 years old, their whole lives ahead of them, and they'd chosen to prey on the vulnerable. What had made them that way? Was it Gloria's influence, or had they corrupted themselves? I drove home on autopilot, my mind churning. I needed to think strategically. If Rebecca really was Rachel Brenner, she'd spent 12 years living a lie, always looking over her shoulder. She'd chosen Jeffrey carefully, a good man from a stable family, someone whose legitimacy could provide cover. Our farm, our reputation in the community, Jeffrey's professional success, all of it was camouflage for her real identity. And I'd welcomed her into our family with open arms. The farmhouse felt too quiet when I arrived. I made tea I didn't drink and sat at the kitchen table, spreading out my printouts. I needed to organize what I knew, create a timeline. 2012. Rachel and Veronica Brenner commit fraud in Chicago. 2013, 2016. The sisters disappear, possibly with Gloria's help. 2017. Rebecca appears in Harrisburg, meets Jeffrey. 2018. They marry. Present. Gloria dies. Rebecca believes she's finally safe. But there were gaps. Where had they been between 2012 and 2017? How had Gloria obtained false identities for her daughters? And where was the money they'd stolen? My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Jeffrey's name appeared on the screen. I almost didn't answer. afraid I wouldn't be able to hide what I knew, but ignoring him would raise suspicion. "Hi, honey. Mom, are you okay? You seemed distracted last night." "Just tired, dear. It was a lovely dinner, though." "Good, good. Listen, I have a favor to ask." He paused. "Rebecca needs to fly to Portland next week to deal with her mother's estate. I can't get time off work right now. We're at a critical point with the bridge project. Would you be willing to go with her?" Every alarm bell in my head went off at once. Rebecca wanted me to go with her to Portland, which almost certainly meant she was planning to destroy evidence at Gloria's real location. Or worse, this was a test. Maybe she had noticed my questions, my careful probing. Maybe this was her way of getting me alone, away from witnesses. I don't know, Jeffrey. It's a long trip and… Please, Mom. I'd feel so much better knowing she wasn't dealing with all that alone. You're good at organizing, sorting through things, and you and Rebecca have such a nice relationship. The irony of that statement nearly made me laugh. Instead, I forced myself to sound thoughtful. When would this be? She's looking at flights for next Wednesday. 4 days, maybe 5. Let me check my calendar and get back to you. After hanging up, I immediately called Stephen. Rebecca wants me to go to Portland with her next week. Absolutely not. Melissa, if she's who we think she is, if I refuse, it'll seem suspicious. And if she's planning to destroy evidence, I need to see where she goes and what she does. You're 70 years old. You're not a trained investigator. This is dangerous. I'm 70 years old and I've survived a farm fire, a tornado, and raising 2 teenagers, I shot back. I can handle Rebecca Hartley or Rachel Brenner or whoever she really is. Silence on the line. Then, if you're going to do this, we need to take precautions. I'll get you a GPS tracker for your phone and a small recording device. You document everything, but you stay safe. At the first sign of real danger, you get out. Understood? Understood. And Melissa? I should have the photo identification verified by tomorrow. I'll let you know what I find. That evening, I sat in Thomas's old recliner, the one I'd been unable to give away after he died, and tried to imagine what he would say if he were here. Thomas had been a practical man, straightforward, and honest to a fault. He would have confronted Rebecca directly, demanded the truth, probably called the police immediately. But Thomas had never understood the subtleties of maneuvering around difficult people. He'd grown up with brothers, straightforward competition, and clear hierarchies. I'd grown up with sisters, where conflicts were rarely direct and victories were often silent. I knew how to watch and wait, how to let people underestimate me while I gathered ammunition, how to smile while planning my next move. Rebecca had chosen the wrong old woman to deceive. The next morning, Stephen called with confirmation. It's them. I worked with a colleague who specializes in facial recognition. The Brenner twins and your daughter-in-law and her sister are the same people. 97% certainty. I'd expected it, but hearing it confirmed still felt like a punch to the gut. What about the money? That's the interesting part. I found some financial records from around the time they disappeared. Gloria Ann Brenner, that was her real name before she became Hartley, withdrew $50,000 from her own accounts in late 2012. Small amounts, careful not to trigger reporting requirements. I suspect she used it to buy their new identities. So the stolen money is still out there somewhere. Most likely in offshore accounts or converted to assets we can't trace easily. They were smart about it, Melissa. They knew how to hide. Not smart enough, I said grimly. They got comfortable. They thought they were safe. What are you going to do about Portland? I'm going. But first, I need to talk to someone. That afternoon, I drove to Vermont. The trip took 6 hours, but I needed to see my daughter Clara in person. She was the only one I could trust with this, the only one who would understand the impossible position I was in. Clara met me at the door of her farmhouse, so like mine, so like the life we'd both chosen, with immediate concern on her face. Mom? What's wrong? I told her everything. The funeral, the overheard conversation, the investigation, the Chicago fraud case. She listened without interrupting, her face growing pale. Jeffrey doesn't know any of this? She finally asked. I can't tell him yet. Not without proof he can't deny. Mom, she could be dangerous. If she realizes you know, that's why I came to you. I pulled out a manila envelope I'd prepared. I've documented everything here. Copies of the newspaper articles, Stephen's initial findings, a timeline. If anything happens to me, don't talk like that. Clara. I took her hands. I'm not being dramatic. I'm being practical. If something happens to me on this Portland trip, you give this to the police. You tell Jeffrey everything. You make sure Rebecca faces justice. She was crying now, and so was I. We'd always been close, my daughter and I. Two strong women who understood each other. Why can't you just give this to the police now? She pleaded. Because Jeffrey will defend her. He loves her, Clara. He'll think I'm losing my mind, that I'm jealous or confused. Men in love don't see clearly. I wiped my eyes. I need irrefutable evidence. I need her to make a mistake while I'm watching. Clara kept the envelope and made me promise to call her every day I was in Portland, to share my location constantly, to leave at the first sign of danger. I promised, though we both knew I was planning to do whatever necessary to protect my son. The drive home that night was long and dark. Somewhere around the Pennsylvania border, my phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Jeffrey told me you agreed to come to Portland. Thank you so much, Melissa. It means the world to have your support. We leave Wednesday at 6 a.m. I'll pick you up. The heart emoji felt like mockery. Or maybe it was genuine. Maybe Rebecca had convinced herself that her lies were justified, that she deserved this life she'd stolen. I texted back, looking forward to it, dear. 3 days until Portland. 3 days to prepare for whatever Rebecca had planned. 3 days until I walked into the spider's web with nothing but my wits and my determination to protect my son. I wasn't afraid, I realized. I was angry. And anger, channeled correctly, was a powerful weapon. Rebecca picked me up at 5:45 Wednesday morning, the sky still dark and studded with stars. I'd barely slept, my suitcase packed and repacked a dozen times as I debated what to bring. Stephen had delivered the GPS tracker and recording device the day before, showing me how to use them with patient thoroughness. The recorder looks like a pen, he'd explained, demonstrating. Just click the top twice to start recording. It'll capture everything within 15 feet for up to 8 hours. Now that pen sat in my jacket pocket, feeling heavier than it should. I also carried my phone with the tracking app activated, a small canister of pepper spray Clara had insisted I take, and the knowledge that I was walking into unknown territory with a woman who'd destroyed lives without remorse. You travel light, Rebecca observed as she loaded my single suitcase into her trunk. I always overpack. At my age, you learn what's essential, I said, settling into the passenger seat. The drive to Harrisburg International Airport took 30 minutes. Rebecca was chatty, nervous energy radiating from her as she talked about the logistics of closing Gloria's house, what furniture might be worth keeping, how she dreaded sorting through decades of accumulated belongings. It's going to be emotional, she said softly as we merged onto the highway. Going through Mom's things without her there. The performance was flawless. The grieving daughter, vulnerable and sad. If I didn't know the truth, I would have reached over and squeezed her hand in sympathy. Instead, I made non-committal sounds of understanding and watched the landscape blur past. At the airport, we checked our bags and made our way through security. The flight to Portland wasn't until 8:30, giving us time for coffee and breakfast at a gateside cafe. Rebecca ordered an egg sandwich and fruit. I ordered oatmeal I couldn't imagine eating. Melissa, can I ask you something personal? Rebecca said suddenly, stirring sugar into her coffee. My heart rate spiked. Of course, dear. Did you ever feel like you were living someone else's life? Like the person everyone sees isn't quite who you really are? The question was so unexpected, so oddly intimate, that I had to carefully compose my response. Was this a confession? A test? Or just morning flight philosophy? I think everyone wears different faces for different people, I said carefully. We're one person with our children, another with our friends, another when we're alone. She nodded, but something in her expression suggested my answer had disappointed her. But underneath all those faces, there's a real you, right? Something authentic that doesn't change? I'd like to think so. Why do you ask? She looked out the terminal window at the planes being serviced on the tarmac. Sometimes I wonder if Mom really knew me, The real me, not the version I showed her. I'm sure she knew you loved her, I offered. That's what matters. Is it? Her eyes met mine, and for just a moment I saw something raw there, doubt or fear or maybe regret. Then it vanished behind her pleasant mask. Sorry, I'm getting maudlin. Grief does strange things to your head. The flight was uneventful. Rebecca read a magazine while I pretended to sleep, my mind racing through possibilities. Where were we really going? Gloria's house had to be somewhere. Stephen's research suggested she'd lived in Portland for 12 years, but that didn't mean the house contained what Rebecca really needed to destroy. We landed in Portland just after 11 local time. Rebecca rented a car, a mid-size sedan, nothing flashy, and programmed an address into the GPS. I noted it carefully. 847 Maple Grove Lane, Forest Hills. It's about 40 minutes from the airport, Rebecca explained as we merged into traffic. Mom liked being close enough to the city for amenities, but far enough out for peace and quiet. The suburbs of Portland rolled past, similar to suburbs everywhere. Shopping centers and housing developments, chain restaurants and gas stations. Gradually, the landscape became more rural, houses spaced farther apart, trees crowding the roadsides. Forest Hills turned out to be a modest neighborhood of small ranch homes and older Cape Cods, the kind of area where retirees and young families overlapped. Number 847 was a pale yellow ranch with white trim, a neat lawn, and a for sale sign already planted near the mailbox. That was fast, I commented, nodding at the sign. I listed it last week, Rebecca said, pulling into the driveway. No point waiting. The market's good right now. She unlocked the front door and we stepped into the still, stale air of an empty house. The furniture was still there. Floral couch, matching armchair, oak coffee table. But it already had that abandoned feeling, as if the life had drained out with Gloria's last breath. I've been dreading this, Rebecca said quietly, setting down her purse. Every room is full of memories. I followed her through the house, making mental notes. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, eat-in kitchen, small basement. Everything was tidy but dated. Wallpaper from the 90s, appliances that had seen better days, carpeting worn thin in the traffic paths. Why don't you start in the kitchen? Rebecca suggested. Pack up anything you think is worth keeping. Good dishes, appliances that work. I'll tackle Mom's bedroom. It was a reasonable division of labor, and it separated us. I clicked the pen recorder in my pocket twice and began opening kitchen cabinets, placing items on the counter as if sorting them while actually searching for anything unusual. 30 minutes later, I'd found nothing but ordinary kitchen supplies and a collection of takeout menus. I moved to the living room, examining the bookshelf, the desk in the corner, the decorative boxes on the mantel. That's when I heard Rebecca upstairs. Except there was no upstairs. The house was a single-story ranch. I froze, listening. The sounds were coming from below, the basement. Moving quietly, I found the basement door in the hallway and opened it slowly. Wooden stairs descended into darkness, but I could see light at the bottom and hear Rebecca moving around. She was talking to someone. I know, she said, her voice tight with stress. I'm handling it. No, she doesn't suspect anything. Vanessa, calm down. The old woman is harmless. I should have stayed upstairs. I should have pretended I heard nothing, but I needed to know what was in that basement, what Rebecca was protecting. I descended the stairs carefully, testing each step for creaks. The basement was finished. Drop ceiling, laminate flooring, fluorescent lights. Rebecca stood with her back to the stairs, her phone to her ear, facing a large filing cabinet against the far wall. I said I'll take care of it, she hissed into the phone. Just stay in Seattle and keep your mouth shut. She ended the call and yanked open the filing cabinet's top drawer. It was stuffed with folders, and she began pulling them out frantically, stacking them on a nearby table. I retreated up 3 steps, then made a show of descending again, calling out, "Rebecca? Do you need help with anything?" She spun around, eyes wide with surprise and something that might have been fear. For a moment, she just stared at me. Then she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Melissa, I didn't hear you come down." I finished with the kitchen. I thought I might. I gestured vaguely at the basement. Actually, this is mostly just Mom's old tax records and bills. Boring stuff. Why don't you start on the bedroom closet? I'll deal with this. It wasn't a request. I nodded and retreated upstairs, my pulse hammering. She was destroying evidence, the files she'd mentioned at the funeral. Whatever was in that basement filing cabinet, it was important enough to risk this trip. I went to Gloria's bedroom and opened the closet, but my mind was on the basement. How could I get back down there without Rebecca noticing? And what exactly was in those files? 20 minutes later, Rebecca emerged from the basement carrying a cardboard box. "I'm going to take this to the car," she announced. "Just some personal papers I want to keep." The moment she was outside, I hurried back to the basement. The filing cabinet was nearly empty now, most of the folders gone. But Rebecca had been in a hurry, and she'd dropped one. It lay half hidden under the table. I grabbed it and flipped it open. Inside were bank statements from 2011, but not for Gloria Hartley. These were for Gloria Brenner, with an address in Winnetka, Illinois, wealthy suburb of Chicago. The statements showed regular deposits, Social Security, pension payments, interest from investments, a normal retiree's income. But there were also large withdrawals in late 2012. $50,000 in cash, taken out in increments of $9,000 to stay under federal reporting requirements. I snapped photos with my phone, hands shaking with adrenaline. Then I heard the front door open. Rebecca was coming back. I shoved the folder back under the table and rushed up the stairs, making it to Gloria's bedroom just as Rebecca entered the hallway. "Finding anything interesting?" she asked, her tone casual but her eyes sharp. "Just clothes. I wasn't sure what you wanted to do with them. Donation boxes are in the garage. Anything wearable can go to Goodwill." We worked for another 2 hours, and with every passing minute, I felt the tension building. Rebecca kept glancing at her phone, checking the time, her agitation barely concealed. She was on a schedule and I was disrupting it. Around 4 o'clock, she announced we should find a hotel and get dinner. "We can come back tomorrow and finish up." But I noticed she took the cardboard box from the car with us when we checked into the Hampton Inn. She wasn't letting those files out of her sight. That evening, over dinner at a chain restaurant near the hotel, Rebecca's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and excused herself, taking the call outside. I immediately pulled out my own phone and texted Clara. "Portland confirmed. Found evidence in basement. Bank statements proving Gloria Brenner identity. Rebecca removing files. I'm safe, but situation escalating." Clara's response was instant. "Get out of there. Come home." I couldn't. Not yet. Not when I was so close to understanding the full picture. Rebecca returned to the table, her face flushed with anger barely held in check. "Everything okay?" I asked innocently. "Fine. Just my sister being difficult." She picked up her fork, then set it down again. "Melissa, I need to ask you something. And I need you to be honest with me." My stomach clenched. "Of course. Has Jeffrey said anything to you about our finances? About me spending too much or being careless with money?" The question seemed to come from nowhere. "No, why would he?" "No reason. I just wondered if he'd been talking to you about me." She studied my face carefully. "You two are close. I thought maybe he'd mentioned concerns." This was a fishing expedition. She was trying to figure out if I knew something, if Jeffrey suspected something. I needed to be very careful. "Jeffrey never criticizes you to me," I said truthfully. "He loves you, Rebecca. He thinks you're wonderful." Something in her expression shifted. Regret, maybe, or shame. "He's a good man. Too good for someone like me." The admission hung in the air between us. Was this another performance? Or was she revealing something real? I couldn't tell anymore. The woman across from me was a skilled liar who'd been playing a role for years. "Why would you say that?" I asked gently. She shook her head. "Ignore me. I'm tired and emotional. Dealing with Mom's death has me thinking about my life, my choices." She attempted a smile. "Let's talk about something else. Tell me about the farm. Jeffrey says you're thinking of planting a new orchard?" We shifted to safer topics, but the conversation felt hollow. I was watching her, and she was watching me, both of us pretending everything was normal, while secrets piled up between us like stones in a wall. Back at the hotel, I waited until I heard Rebecca's shower running in the adjacent room, then called Stephen. I found bank records proving Gloria was really Gloria Brenner from Winnetka. She withdrew the money to buy their new identities. I have photos. That's good work, but Melissa, you need to be careful. If Rebecca realizes what you found, I know, but there's more in that house. Tomorrow I need to get back into that basement alone. How are you planning to do that? I don't know yet, but I'll figure something out. After we hung up, I sat on the hotel bed and reviewed the photos I'd taken. The bank statements were clear evidence that Gloria had helped her daughters disappear. But I still needed proof that Rebecca was Rachel Brenner, needed something that would stand up in court and convince Jeffrey. A sound in the hallway made me look up. Footsteps outside my door, pausing. I held my breath, watching the shadow in the gap beneath the door. Then Rebecca's voice. Melissa? Are you still awake? My heart pounded. I quickly locked my phone and went to the door, opening it with the chain still engaged. Rebecca stood there in her pajamas and robe, her expression worried. I'm sorry to bother you, but I thought I heard you on the phone. Is everything okay? How much had she heard? The walls in cheap hotels were notoriously thin. Just checking in with Clara, I said easily. She worries when I travel. Rebecca nodded slowly. Of course. Well, good night. We have a long day tomorrow. I closed the door and leaned against it, listening to her footsteps retreat. Then I heard her door open and close. She was suspicious. I'd been too careful, too interested, too present. And now she was watching me as closely as I was watching her. I wedged a chair under my doorknob, probably useless, but it made me feel safer, and tried to sleep. Every sound in the hotel seemed magnified. Voices in other rooms, the ice machine humming, cars in the parking lot. Around 2 a.m, I heard Rebecca's door open again. Footsteps in the hallway, descending the stairs. Where was she going? I got up and looked out my window. The parking lot was quiet, but after a few minutes, I saw Rebecca emerge from the hotel carrying the cardboard box. She went to the car, opened the trunk, and did something I couldn't quite see from my angle. Then she returned to the hotel empty-handed. What had she done with those files? Hidden them somewhere? Destroyed them? I lay back down, but sleep was impossible. Tomorrow I would have to be smarter, faster. Tomorrow I would have to find a way to get what I needed before Rebecca eliminated all the evidence. And tomorrow, I suspected, the careful game we'd been playing would finally come to an end. I woke to pounding on my hotel room door. Gray morning light filtered through the curtains, barely 6 o'clock. Rebecca's voice came through the wood, sharp and urgent. Melissa, we need to talk. Now. My mouth went dry. I pulled on my robe and removed the chair from under the doorknob, my hands unsteady. When I opened the door, Rebecca stood there fully dressed, her face pale and her eyes red-rimmed. She pushed past me into the room. Close the door, she said. I did, my heart hammering. This was it. The confrontation I'd been dreading and preparing for. Whatever happened in the next few minutes would determine everything. Rebecca turned to face me, and I saw her hands were shaking. I know why you're really here. I said nothing, waiting. Let her talk. Let her reveal how much she knew. You've been investigating me, she continued, her voice tight. Don't bother denying it. I found the GPS tracker on your phone. I heard you talking to someone last night, not Clara. A man. And the way you've been watching me, asking questions, you think I'm stupid? I think you're many things, Rachel, I said quietly. But stupid isn't one of them. The name hit her like a physical blow. She actually stumbled back a step, her face draining of what little color remained. What did you call me? Rachel Brenner. Or do you prefer Veronica? I'm sorry, I sometimes get confused which twin is which. I kept my voice calm, steady, despite the fear coursing through me. Although I suppose you're Rachel, since Vanessa is Veronica. You at least kept your birth order consistent when you stole new identities. She stared at me for a long moment, and I watched the calculation happen behind her eyes. Deny, deflect, or admit? What strategy would serve her best? How long have you known? She finally asked. Since the funeral. I heard you and your sister talking. Now that Mom is gone, she can't tell anyone what we did. I moved to sit in the room's single chair. unwilling to show how frightened I was. I hired a private investigator. It didn't take long to find the newspaper articles about the Brenner twins and their investment fraud scheme. Elder fraud, Rachel. You destroyed people's lives. She sank onto the edge of my bed, her composure cracking. You don't understand. Then explain it to me. Help me understand how two young women could steal from retirees, people who'd worked their whole lives and feel no remorse. There was remorse, the words burst out of her. Do you think I don't think about it every single day? Do you think I don't see their faces when I close my eyes? Yet you married my son under false pretenses. You built a life on lies. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face now. I love Jeffrey. That's the truth, Melissa. Everything else might be lies, but not that. I love him more than I've ever loved anyone. You have a strange way of showing it. I was trying to protect him. If he knew who I really was, what I'd done. She broke off, wiping her eyes. I wanted to be worthy of him. I wanted to become the person he thinks I am. You can't become someone else by pretending, I said. Believe me, I've seen people try. It always catches up with you. She laughed bitterly. Well, it's caught up now, hasn't it? What are you going to do? Turn me in? Destroy Jeffrey's life along with mine? The question I'd been wrestling with for days. What was I going to do? I'd gathered evidence, uncovered the truth, cornered the predator. But the predator was my son's wife, and any justice I sought would shatter his heart. Tell me everything, I said instead. The whole truth. Then we'll figure out what comes next. Rebecca looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. We grew up in Winnetka. Wealthy suburb, good schools, everything perfect on the surface. But our father, Robert was his real name, he drank. And when he drank, he got mean. She paused. Mom did her best to protect us, but we learned early that the world isn't kind to people who show weakness. That doesn't excuse fraud. No, it doesn't. But maybe it explains it. She took a shaky breath. When Dad died, actually died, when I was 20, he left nothing but debts. The house was mortgaged to the hilt. Mom's retirement account was empty because he'd gambled it away. We were going to lose everything. So you decided to steal from other people to make up for it. We decided to survive, she said sharply. Vanessa had been working as a bank teller. She saw how easy it was to manipulate older clients, how trusting they were. And I was good at building relationships, making people believe in me. So you targeted the vulnerable. We told ourselves they could afford it, that we were just redistributing wealth, taking from people who had more than they needed. She shook her head. The rationalizations were endless. But the truth was simpler. We were desperate and we were angry and we made terrible choices. How much did you steal? $843,000 over 18 months. We were careful, spread it across dozens of small investors. But one of them, Mr. Patterson, he got suspicious, started asking questions, comparing notes with other victims. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. He took his own life. Left a note saying he couldn't face his wife, couldn't tell her he'd lost everything they'd saved. The pain in her voice sounded genuine. And that's when you ran? That's when we realized what we'd become. Mom helped us disappear, used most of what we'd stolen to buy new identities, new lives. The rest went into accounts we couldn't touch without exposing ourselves. We agreed we'd never use the money, never profit from what we'd done. Noble, I said dryly. Did that make you feel better? She flinched. No, nothing made us feel better. Vanessa went to Seattle, became a dental hygienist, tried to lose herself in routine. I came here, to a small city where nobody knew me, and then I met Jeffrey, and saw an opportunity. No, she stood up, agitated. I tried to stay away from him. I knew I didn't deserve someone like him, but he was so good, Melissa. So honest and kind and everything I'd never been. He made me want to be better. So you lied to him from the very first day. What was I supposed to do? Tell him on our first date that I was a wanted criminal? That would have gone well. She paced the small room. I thought I could just be Rebecca. I thought if I was good enough for long enough, I could somehow earn the life I'd stolen. It doesn't work that way. I know that now. She stopped pacing, facing me. What are you going to do? I stood up, meeting her eyes. What are you going to do, Rachel? She blinked, confused. What? I'm asking what you're going to do. You have choices here. You can run, leave Jeffrey, disappear again, spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. You can wait for me to turn you in and let the legal system handle it. Or, I paused, watching her carefully. Or you can take responsibility. What does that mean? It means you turn yourself in. You confess to the fraud, face the consequences, and accept whatever punishment comes. It means you give Jeffrey the truth and let him decide what he wants to do with it. She laughed, a broken sound. That's insane. I'd go to prison for years. Jeffrey would hate me. I'd lose everything. You're going to lose everything anyway, I said gently. The only question is whether you lose it like a coward, or like someone who's finally learned to face what she's done. She sank back onto the bed, her face in her hands. We sat in silence for several minutes, the hotel room's heating units cycling on and off, voices from adjacent rooms filtering through the walls. Finally, she looked up. If I confess, will you be there for Jeffrey? He's going to need his mother. Of course I will. But Rachel, if you do this, it has to be complete. No half-truths, no manipulations. Full confession to the authorities, restitution to whatever extent possible, and honesty with Jeffrey. The money, she said suddenly. The stolen money. It's in an account in the Cayman Islands. Mom set it up, said it was our emergency fund. But we never touched it. It's all still there, probably more with interest. Then that's where you start. Return the money to the victims or their families. It won't undo the damage, but it's something. She nodded slowly, then pulled out her phone. I need to call Vanessa. She deserves to know what I'm about to do. Put it on speaker, I said. She did. The phone rang 3 times before Vanessa answered, her voice thick with sleep. Rachel? It's 6 a.m. here. What? She knows, Rebecca interrupted. Jeffrey's mother. She knows everything. Silence. Then, how much? All of it. Chicago. The Brenner name. Mr. Patterson. Everything. Then get out of there. Leave her and… No. Rebecca's voice was firm. I'm done running, Ronnie. I'm turning myself in. Are you insane? After everything we did to stay free? After Mom died keeping our secret, Rebecca said, cutting her off. She died afraid and guilty and alone because of what we asked her to do. I won't die the same way. You're going to throw away your life? Throw me under the bus? You can make your own choice. Stay in Seattle. Keep living as Vanessa. Hope nobody ever connects you to me. Or do what I'm doing. Face it, and accept the consequences. Vanessa's voice turned cold. You were always the weak one, always needing validation, needing to be loved. I knew Jeffrey would ruin everything. Jeffrey saved me, Rebecca said quietly. He showed me what it means to be genuinely good. I'm sorry I can't be the partner in crime you need anymore. She ended the call and looked at me. She won't turn herself in. That's her choice. You can only control yours. Rebecca stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Portland morning. I need to go back to the house. There are documents in those files. Account information, passwords, a list of the victims, everything the authorities will need. I thought you destroyed them last night. I was going to. I took them out to the car, sat there with a lighter in my hand. She turned to face me. But I couldn't do it. Some part of me, the part that still feels guilty, that still has a conscience, I couldn't destroy the evidence. I hid the box in the garage instead. We checked out of the hotel and drove to Gloria's house in silence. The morning was gray and cold, threatening rain. Rebecca unlocked the garage and retrieved the cardboard box from behind a stack of paint cans. Inside the house, she spread the contents across the dining room table. File folders, bank statements, a ledger in Gloria's handwriting documenting every fraudulent transaction, a USB drive labeled Victims. Mom kept meticulous records, Rebecca said. She said if we ever got caught, at least we could make restitution. I think she always believed we'd eventually do the right thing. I photographed everything with my phone, sending copies to Stephen and Clara. Evidence preserved, no matter what happened next. There's one more thing, Rebecca said, pulling out a sealed envelope from the bottom of the box. Mom wrote this before she got sick. She made me promise to read it if anything happened to her. She opened the envelope and unfolded several handwritten pages. As she read, tears began streaming down her face. What does it say? I asked gently. She's apologizing. To the victims, to us, to God. She says, Rebecca's voice broke. She says she failed as a mother, that she should have taught us integrity instead of survival, that helping us escape was the worst thing she ever did. She handed me the letter. Gloria's handwriting was shaky but clear, the words raw with regret and guilt. She'd carried this burden alone for 12 years, dying without ever unburdening herself. She wanted us to turn ourselves in, Rebecca whispered. She was just too afraid we'd hate her for it. She loved you, I said. Parents do terrible things for love sometimes. Rebecca gathered all the documents back into the box. I need to tell Jeffrey before I go to the police. He deserves to hear it from me. I'll be there, I said. We'll drive back to Pennsylvania today and talk to him tonight. She nodded, then looked at me with something like wonder. Why are you helping me? I lied to your son. I inserted myself into your family under false pretenses. You should hate me. I thought about that. Maybe I should. But I'm 70 years old, and I've learned that hate is exhausting. What you did was wrong, unforgivably wrong. But you're also human, and you're trying to do better. That counts for something. Will Jeffrey see it that way? I don't know. But at least he'll know the truth. And the truth, however painful, is always better than a lie. We locked up the house and began the long drive to the airport. As we traveled, Rebecca talked about her childhood, her fears, her hopes for a future she knew was slipping away. I listened, bearing witness to her confession. On the plane home, she dozed fitfully while I sat awake, thinking about Jeffrey's face when he learned the truth, thinking about the family dinners that would never be the same, the trust that had been shattered, the long road ahead. But I also thought about redemption and accountability, about the difference between justice and revenge, about what it meant to be wise instead of simply right. Rebecca had made terrible choices. She would face terrible consequences. But she was finally, after 12 years of running, choosing to face them with courage instead of cowardice. That had to count for something. As our plane began its descent into Harrisburg, Rebecca reached over and took my hand. Thank you, she said softly, for giving me the chance to do this the right way. I squeezed her hand gently. You're the one doing the hard part. I'm just bearing witness. The plane touched down as the sun was setting, painting the Pennsylvania sky in shades of orange and red, beautiful and terrible at the same time, like so many things in life. We had one more stop to make before the truth could finally be told, and I prayed that when the dust settled, my son would still be standing. We arrived at Jeffrey and Rebecca's house just after 7 o'clock. The porch light was on, warm and welcoming, and I could see my son moving around in the kitchen through the window. He was making dinner, probably worried about his wife and mother traveling, probably planning to have a meal ready when we returned. My heart broke for him. Rebecca sat in the passenger seat of my car. We'd left hers at the airport, staring at the house she would likely never live in again. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, and I could see her lips moving in what might have been a prayer. Are you ready? I asked gently. No, but I don't think I ever will be, so we might as well do it now. We walked to the door together. I reached out and squeezed her shoulder, a gesture of solidarity, perhaps, or simply human compassion for someone about to lose everything. She gave me a grateful look and rang the doorbell. Jeffrey opened the door with a smile that faded when he saw our faces. What's wrong? What happened? We need to talk, Rebecca said, her voice barely above a whisper. All of us. Please. He stepped aside to let us in, concern etched across his features. Is someone hurt? Did something happen in Portland? Let's sit down, I suggested, moving toward the living room. We arranged ourselves carefully. Jeffrey and Rebecca on the couch, me in the armchair across from them. The room was so familiar, so full of memories of family gatherings and holiday meals. The wedding photo on the mantel showed Jeffrey and Rebecca beaming at each other, young and hopeful and unaware of the shadows that would eventually find them. Rebecca took a deep breath. Jeffrey, I need to tell you something. And I need you to listen to all of it before you say anything, because if you interrupt, I might lose my courage. He reached for her hand instinctively. You're scaring me. I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for so many things. She looked at me, and I nodded encouragement. My name isn't Rebecca Hartley. It's Rachel Brenner. I'm not from Portland. I grew up in Winnetka, Illinois. And 8 years ago, when I met you, I was a fugitive wanted for investment fraud. Jeffrey's hand went slack in hers. He stared at her, incomprehension giving way to shock. What are you talking about? And she told him. Everything. The abusive father, the desperation after his death, the decision to target vulnerable retirees, the 18 months of systematic fraud, Mr. Patterson's suicide, the flight from Chicago, Gloria's help in creating new identities, the 12 years of hiding. I watched my son's face transform as he listened. Disbelief became horror. Horror became anger. Anger became something more complex. Betrayal mixed with grief, mixed with the slow, terrible realization that the woman he'd loved was someone he'd never really known. When Rebecca finished, silence filled the room like water in a sinking ship. Say something, she finally whispered. Please. Jeffrey stood up abruptly and walked to the window, his back to us. His shoulders were rigid, his hands clenched at his sides. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. Who are you? Because you're not the woman I married. That woman was honest and kind and... He turned around, tears streaming down his face. Was any of it real? Did you ever actually love me? Or was I just part of your cover story? I love you, Rebecca said, standing. Jeffrey, that's the only true thing in all of this. I love you more than... Don't. He held up a hand. Don't tell me you love me while admitting you've lied about everything else. You stole from elderly people. Someone died because of what you did. And you looked me in the eye every single day and pretended to be someone you're not. I was trying to become that person. I was trying to be worthy of you. You can't become a good person by building your life on lies. His voice cracked. Mom, did you know about this? I found out at the funeral, I said quietly. I've been investigating since then. He looked between us, understanding dawning. The trip to Portland, that wasn't about supporting Rebecca through her grief. You were confronting her. I needed to know the truth. I needed to understand what she was hiding before I could figure out what to do about it. And what are you going to do? He looked at Rebecca. What are both of you going to do? Rebecca straightened her shoulders, summoning dignity from somewhere deep inside. I'm turning myself in. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to the FBI field office in Harrisburg and confessing everything. I have documentation, account information for the stolen money, a list of victims, all the evidence they'll need. You kept evidence of your crimes? Jeffrey asked incredulously. My mother kept it. She always believed we'd eventually do the right thing. Rebecca's voice steadied. The money is still in an offshore account. All of it, plus interest. I'm going to cooperate fully with the investigation and make restitution to the victims' families. Jeffrey sank back onto the couch, his head in his hands. This is insane. This can't be happening. I moved to sit beside him, putting my arm around his shoulders. I know this is devastating, honey, but Rebecca is trying to make it right. Make it right? He looked up at me. Mom, she's a criminal. She stole from people like you and Thomas. She destroyed lives. Yes, she did. And now she's going to face the consequences. After 8 years, after building a life with me, making me fall in love with her, his voice broke completely. I don't even know who I've been married to. Rebecca knelt in front of him, tears streaming down her face. You've been married to a broken person who was trying desperately to put herself back together. You've been married to someone who learned what real love looks like because you showed her. Jeffrey, everything good in me came from knowing you. That's not fair, he said, but his voice was softer now. You don't get to make me complicit in your redemption. You're not complicit. You're innocent. You're the only innocent person in this whole mess. She reached for his hand, and this time he didn't pull away. I'm going to prison. I know that. I deserve that. But before I go, I need you to know that loving you was the best thing I ever did. The only completely unselfish thing. They sat like that for a long moment, both crying, while I watched from my chair and felt my own tears falling. This was what betrayal looked like when it wore the face of love. Not clean or simple, but messy and complicated and heartbreaking. Finally, Jeffrey spoke. I need time. I need to think about all of this without you here. Rebecca nodded and stood. I'll stay at a hotel tonight. Give you space. No, I said firmly. You'll stay at the farm with me. Jeffrey needs his space, and you need someone to make sure you don't run. She gave me a look of such gratitude that I almost couldn't bear it. Thank you, Melissa. Jeffrey walked us to the door but didn't hug either of us goodbye. He looked hollowed out, a shell of the confident, happy man who'd greeted us an hour earlier. As we drove away, I saw him standing on the porch, watching us go, and I wondered if he would ever be whole again. At the farm, I made tea while Rebecca sat at the kitchen table where we'd shared so many meals over the years. The cats wound around her ankles, indifferent to human drama, and she reached down to pet them absently. He'll never forgive me, she said. Maybe not. But that's not why you're confessing, is it? You're confessing because it's the right thing to do, regardless of whether Jeffrey forgives you. Your mother must have been an exceptional woman to raise someone like you. I smiled sadly. She was tough as nails and twice as sharp. She used to say that doing the right thing rarely feels good at the time. That's how you know it's actually right and not just convenient. She sounds wise. She was. And she would tell you that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done despite being terrified. Rebecca cupped her hands around her mug of tea. I'm terrified. Of prison. Of losing Jeffrey forever. Of facing the people I hurt. But I'm also relieved. 12 years of looking over my shoulder. 12 years of remembering what I did. I'm so tired, Melissa. Then rest. Tomorrow you start making things right. But tonight, you can rest. I showed her to the guest room, the same room she and Jeffrey had stayed in during holidays, and left her to whatever peace she might find. Downstairs, I called Stephen to update him on everything that had happened. He listened without interrupting, then let out a long breath. You did good work, Melissa, and you handled it better than most people would have. I don't feel like I handled it well. My son is devastated. Your son will heal. The truth hurts, but lies fester. You gave him the chance to know what he's really dealing with. After hanging up, I sat in Thomas's old recliner and thought about the past 2 weeks. I'd started with a mystery overheard at a funeral, and ended with a woman ready to face justice for crimes committed in desperation and youth. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined when I first hired Stephen, but it felt right somehow. The next morning, I drove Rebecca to the FBI field office in Harrisburg. She'd dressed carefully, conservative suit, minimal makeup, looking every inch the respectable woman she'd pretended to be. She carried the cardboard box of evidence like a shield. Do you want me to come in with you? I asked. No, this is something I need to do alone. She paused with her hand on the car door. Will you tell Jeffrey? Tell him I'm sorry. Tell him he deserves someone real. Tell him yourself. Write him letters from prison. Let him decide if he wants to read them. She nodded and got out of the car. I watched her walk into the building, shoulders back, head high, and felt an unexpected surge of pride. This was courage, not the flashy kind that makes headlines, but the quiet kind that rebuilds souls. I drove home slowly, taking the long route past the fields and farms that had shaped my life. Spring was truly arriving now, everything green and new and full of promise. The land didn't care about human drama. It just kept growing, kept pushing forward, kept renewing itself season after season. That evening, Jeffrey called. Is she really turning herself in? She did. This morning. The FBI has all the evidence. A long pause. I don't know what I'm supposed to feel. You're supposed to feel exactly what you're feeling. Anger, betrayal, grief. It's all valid. Part of me still loves her. How messed up is that? It's not messed up. It's human. Love doesn't shut off just because someone disappoints us. I paused, choosing my words carefully. Jeffrey, what Rebecca did was terrible. But she's trying to make amends. That doesn't erase her crimes. But it counts for something. I know. I need time to process all of this. Take all the time you need. I'll be here." Over the following weeks, the story unfolded in the news. The FBI arrested Vanessa in Seattle. She'd panicked when Rachel confessed and tried to flee to Canada. The stolen money was recovered and distributed to victims' families. 3 retirees who'd lost their homes were able to buy them back. Mr. Patterson's widow received a letter from Rachel, begging forgiveness and explaining where the money to restore her savings had come from. Rachel pleaded guilty to all charges and was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. The judge noted her cooperation and genuine remorse as mitigating factors, but emphasized that her crimes had devastated innocent people. Vanessa, who showed no remorse and fought the charges, received 12 years. Jeffrey filed for divorce, but wrote Rachel a letter saying he hoped she'd use her time in prison to truly become the person she'd been pretending to be. It was more grace than most people would have shown, and I was proud of him for finding it. 6 months after Rachel's sentencing, Jeffrey came to the farm for Sunday dinner, a tradition we'd reinstated slowly, carefully rebuilding our relationship. He looked healthier, the haunted expression gradually fading from his eyes. "I've been thinking about getting a dog," he said over pot roast and vegetables from my garden. "The house feels too empty." "That sounds like a good idea. And I've been seeing a therapist, trying to figure out how I missed all the signs, how I could have been so blind." "You weren't blind, honey. You were trusting. That's not a character flaw." "Maybe not, but I need to be smarter about who I trust going forward." He paused, pushing peas around his plate. "She writes me letters, from prison. I haven't opened them yet. That's okay. Open them when you're ready. Or don't open them at all. There's no right answer. Do you think people can really change? Really become different than they were?" I thought about Rachel, broken and desperate at 22, making terrible choices that echoed through years. I thought about her face in the hotel room when she decided to confess, the courage it took to face her crimes. I thought about Gloria's letter and the burden of secrets carried too long. "I think people can change," I said finally, "but it requires facing who they really are, not hiding from it." Rachel ran for 12 years. It wasn't until she stopped running that she could start changing. Jeffrey nodded slowly. "I might read the letters. Eventually. Whatever you decide, I support you." He reached across the table and took my hand. "Thank you, Mom, for everything. For investigating, for confronting her, for giving her the chance to do the right thing. I was angry at first, but now I see. You protected me the only way you could. That's what mothers do, even old ones." I squeezed his hand. "Especially old ones. We've got decades of practice reading people and situations." He smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from him in months. "Remind me never to underestimate you." "Too late. Everyone always does." I smiled back. "That's my secret weapon." After Jeffrey left, I walked out to the pasture where Thomas and I used to sit and watch the sunset. The spring evening was mild, the sky painted in shades of pink and gold. In the distance, I could see the new orchard I'd planted, young trees that would take years to mature but would eventually provide fruit for generations. Legacy, I thought, wasn't just about what you built, but about what you protected. I'd protected my son from a lie that would have eventually destroyed him. I'd given a broken woman the chance to face her past with dignity. I'd proven that wisdom and patience were more powerful than any weapon. The stolen money had been returned. The victims had found some measure of justice. Rachel and Vanessa were serving their sentences. Jeffrey was healing. And I was here, on the farm that had taught me everything I knew about patience and seasons and the long arc of growth. The land would be here long after I was gone, passing to Jeffrey and eventually to his children, if he ever trusted enough to love again. It would remember the storms we'd weathered, the droughts we'd survived, the careful tending that turned seeds into harvests. Just like the careful tending that had turned a mystery overheard at a funeral into justice, accountability, and the hard-won possibility of redemption. I walked back to the farmhouse as the stars began appearing, feeling Thomas's presence in the creaking floorboards and the familiar walls. He would have been proud of how I'd handled this, I thought. Proud of the patience, the strategy, the refusal to let anger override wisdom. Inside, I made my evening tea and settled into my chair with a book. The cats curled up beside me, purring contentedly. Tomorrow I'd work in the garden, tend to the chickens, maybe drive into town for supplies. Life would go on, as it always did, steady and sure, like the seasons. And if another mystery ever found its way to my door, I'd be ready. After all, I was Melissa Green. 70 years old, underestimated by everyone, and still sharp as the day was long. Let them keep underestimating me. It only made my victories sweeter,